right, Merry Christmas. How's everybody doing? Great to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us here at Willow for Christmas. We're ecstatic that each and every one of you are here. I know you already did it, but can you put your hands together one more time for the creative team and for just helping create an amazing, amazing experience for us today. I don't know about you, but I love this time of year. I mean, I love everything about Christmas, but as much as I love Christmas, if your life is anything like mine, your life gets full of all kinds of other details this time of year. And if we're not careful, it can make us feel a little bit anxious, a little bit busy, pulled in all kinds of different directions for a lot of good reasons, though. I mean, this is the year, we buy all the gifts, we wrap all the gifts, we make travel arrangements for those of you who are heading out of town, or we make preparations for family members to join us. All kinds of food preparations, whatever the details are, there are a lot of details that we manage in this season. And they're all good things, they're all important things, but if we're not careful, we can allow these little things to distract us or keep us from missing the most significant thing this time of year. And so if you'd allow me to, I would love for us to all make the commitment together that regardless of the amount of details you're managing between today and tomorrow morning, if we can just set those details aside and to not let the little yet important details keep us from the significance this particular season. It kind of reminds me of years ago. My wife and I were traveling with our two young boys at the time back home for Christmas. I grew up in Amarillo, Texas. And so we were traveling back for Christmas, and we were traveling with two little kids. My kids were probably 3 and 1 at the time. And I don't know if you've ever traveled with real little ones, but it is a feat to behold, isn't it? Because you carry all kinds of things when your kids are young. You got pack-and-plays and car seats and strollers. And I mean, it feels like you pack up your entire house and try to take it on a plane with you. And so I remember that kind of experience. And we have our two little ones. And as you would imagine, trying to catch a flight from Chicago to Amarillo, Texas, there aren't a lot of direct flights to Amarillo, Texas. And so we had a connecting flight through Dallas. And we planned it in such a way that we had plenty of time to make the connection. I wasn't that concerned about it. However, it was the last flight out of Dallas to Amarillo. So I said to Lindsay, whatever we do, we cannot miss this connecting flight. If we miss the connecting flight, we miss Christmas morning with my family. And so we were very committed to do whatever it took to make sure that we made that flight. Well, everything started off great. And we were on the plane. It left a little bit late from Chicago, but nothing too troubling. And so we got up in the air. My kids are great travelers. And so even at the age of 1 and 3, they were doing great on the plane. But there was a moment where my oldest, he needed to use the restroom. And so he said, Dad, can you take me? So we went to the back of the plane. And as we were coming back to our seats, I like to travel comfortable. And so I was wearing flip-flops. And I'm not sure how I did it, but somehow I snagged my shoe. And my flip-flop broke where the top part got disconnected from the bottom part. You know what I'm saying? And I don't know if you've ever had that experience, but they're impossible to walk in when that happens because there's no longer any flip, there's only flop. And so it is not a good experience. And so I'm kind of, gimping my way back to my seat. I think it's kind of funny. It's really not that big of a deal. We take our seat. We finally get to Dallas. Now, when we get to Dallas, we had one of those experiences where we landed, we taxied our way toward the gate, but they held us away from the gate. I'm not really sure why, but they held us for quite some time. And the longer we sat there, the more our connecting time really began to shrink, that I got pretty worried about it. So I leaned to Lindsay, and we formed this game plan. Who's going to get the stroller? Who's got the car seat? Pack and plays. How are we going to, get there as quickly as we can? And so we felt like we were on an episode of The Amazing Race. We were going to, race across the airport. We had to change terminals. It was going to be a pretty significant type of thing. And so we started racing. The challenge was, with a gimpy shoe, I was being outrun by my 1-year-old. It was not a sight to behold. And so I'm kind of gimping my way through the airport, trying to make this now a very tight connection. We finally get to the gate. I'm so overwhelmed with joy because the plane is sitting right there. It's connected to the gate. I know we're going to make it. I get up to the place where we're just about to hand our tickets to the gate agent, and they close the door. Now, those of you who traveled, you know what that means. Once they close the door, they do not open the door again. And so I'm like begging and pleading the agent. The plane is right there. The gate's still attached to it. I'm holding 2 little kids. This is the last flight out. Would you please, I know it's breaking protocol. Would you let us on the plane? And you would think that the Grinch was the gate agent that particular day, was not having any of my begging and pleading, was like, sorry, sir, that's just not possible. And so we settled for a couple of food vouchers to restaurants that were already closed in the airport, and we were put up in a hotel, and we'd eventually miss Christmas morning with my family. And it's interesting that something so small, this stupid little sandal, cost us from experiencing something so significant. Christmas with my family. I mean, there was no flip. There was only flop. It was a flop of connection. It was a flop of a Christmas. My attitude was certainly a flop on that particular day. But it kind of serves to remind me that sometimes it's the smallest things, the littlest things that keep us away from the most significant things in our lives. And so if you'd allow me to, I'd love to take all the details, all the things pulling at you, set them aside for a moment so that we don't let the little things cause us to miss the most significant aspect of Christmas. So as I mentioned, the creative team did an amazing job sharing with us the Christmas story through creativity, through video, through song. You've already heard the Christmas story, so I don't want to share the whole Christmas story. I just want to focus on one verse. The Christmas story is recorded for us in the Bible in the book of Luke chapter 2. So if you got a Bible, you can go to Luke chapter 2, or I'll put the words on the screen as well. And I want to focus on one verse. And if we really sink into this one verse, I think that we'll really receive the significance of that very first Christmas. But not just the very first Christmas, I think that we'll find significance this Christmas as well. This one verse are just the simple words that God delivered through an angel to the shepherds that were at the field. But in some ways, it culminates the entire Christmas story in one verse. So here it is. Luke chapter 2, verse 10 says this. It says, but the angel Lord said to him, do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people. Now, here's what I like to do. I want to put that verse up again, but instead I'm just going to underline a particular word. And when I get to that particular word or words, if you would read those words out loud with me, it kind of shows me you're engaged. How many young people do we have, kids that we have in the room? Now, here's the reality, kids. Your parents will be too embarrassed to read those words with some gusto, with some volume. I'm counting on you to bring the volume, okay? So when we get there, if you can join me, read these words with some passion, like it's Christmas, like we're excited about it. Here's what it says. The angel said to them, do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all people. So here's the first thing we learned about that first Christmas, the message. It is a message of good news. Now, I don't know about you, but my experience growing up as I interfaced with Christians, as I started learning the Christmas message, it didn't always feel like good news. I mean, sometimes I would interact with Christians on the street with signs and bullhorns, and it felt more like a message of condemnation or judgment than it did feel like good news. Or sometimes I would interface in church types of environment, and it feels like it was this overwhelming amount of rules. There's all the stuff that I shouldn't do, or what I should do, or what I can't do, or what's forbidden. And it just felt like this list of this almost overwhelming, overbearing types of rules. It was like, don't smoke, don't chew, don't go with girls who do. It was kind of one of those types of experiences. And so it felt like somewhat judgmental, somewhat condemning, somewhat like rules. It didn't feel like good news. But the angel told the shepherds in the fields that what happened that very first Christmas, when the God of the universe took on human form, when Jesus entered into the world, it was the greatest news this world had ever known. It was truly good news. And if it was good news some 2,000 years ago, I'm convinced that it's still incredible news today. The question is, what does good news mean to you? It kind of hits me that probably each and every one of us receive good news or experience good news or might be expectant of good news in a different way. So for example, again, how many kids do we have? How many young people do we have in the room? My guess is if you're younger in the room, what good news means is good news is waking up tomorrow morning and receiving everything on your Christmas list. That sounds like good news, right? Or how about, how many of you are parents of young kids? Parents of young kids, good news probably sounds like my kid's sleeping at least till 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. That sounds like good news. Or maybe it feels somewhat different. Maybe you're somebody who's fallen on hard times. This has been a really difficult season financially, and so good news sounds like an unexpected gift or potentially a bonus or new opportunity. That's what good news sounds like. Well, for somebody who just wrapped up their last chemo treatment, good news sounds like a clean report. So I don't know where you're at. I don't know what you're facing. I don't know the challenges that you're up against, but my assumption is good news probably looks a little different to every single person that's here. Now, I don't want to minimize any of those situations or the different types of examples that I've given here. I don't want to minimize those circumstances. All of those matter. All of those are important to God. I want to encourage you to take every struggle, every challenge to Him. However, I'm not convinced that Jesus came into the world simply to change our circumstances. Now, again, don't mishear me. I hope that for some of you who are facing some insurmountable challenges, I hope God does something about those circumstances. I hope that you receive that miracle. I hope that you experience something new. However, I'm not convinced that very first Christmas, when Jesus broke into the world and the angel proclaimed the good news, I don't know if the good news was simply about changing our circumstances. I think it might have been more about God coming to this world to change us in such a way that we could transcend any circumstance. The truth is, I don't think that He brought just a message of good news. The truth is, I think Jesus Himself was the good news. And if we lean into Jesus being the good news, no matter the situation we're in, no matter what challenge we're facing, no matter what struggle we're up against, if He's the good news, He's the one that gives us the ability to transcend any and all circumstances. So what does it look like to see Jesus as good news this Christmas? It might look like one of these things. That when we are weak, He is our strength. When we are lost, He is our guide. When we feel helpless, He is our helper. When we're sick, He's our healer. When we've lost our way, He is the way. When we're attacked, He's our shield. When we're trapped, He's our deliverer. When we're out of resources, He's our provider. When we're scared, He's our defender. When we're broken, He binds up the wounds. When we're alone, He's our companion. When we've hit rock bottom, He is our bedrock. When we're attacked, He's our advocate. When we're in sin, He's our forgiver. When we're afraid, He's our encourager. When we want to give up, He helps us rise up. When we fall, He's our victory. When we panic, He's our peace. When we're depressed, He is our hope. When we cannot see, He is our light. When we do not know what to do, He's our refuge. When we're overwhelmed, He's our anchor. When we're exhausted, He's our strength. When we're frustrated, He's our answer. When we've lost our direction, He's our purpose. When we've hit a dead end, He is our fresh start. He is the good news. He's the good news that transcends all circumstances. When the angel made the declaration to the shepherds in the field, I got good news. The good news is the good news of God took on flesh in Jesus, and that fundamentally changed everything. Don't miss this Christmas the message of good news. But it wasn't just a message of good news. I want to take us back to the same verse. Underline different words. Again, help me out when we get to the underlined words. Here's what it says. The angel said to them, do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will causes great joy for all the people. I mean, I love that. It's not just good news. It's good news, and that good news can cause us great joy in our lives. Now, I would say there's no more future-thinking people this time of year than kids, right? Because all we can think about is what happens tomorrow morning, what gifts we might be able to receive. We're very future-thinking, future-oriented this time of year. I remember a number of years ago, in preparation for Christmas, I set my two kids down, and at the time, my oldest was about 8 years old. I gave him an iPad, and I said, hey, here's a piece of paper, and I pulled the Target app up on the iPad, and I said, would you kind of go through the toy section and make me out a Christmas list so I know some of the things that you hope to receive this year? And so I left him for about 45 minutes. I came back, and he had a whole list of things. There are probably 20 items on this sheet. And I was like, well done. That gives me a lot of ideas. Thanks for doing this. And I started looking over the list, and like 19 of the 20 items were Nerf items. I mean, there's a Nerf gun, Nerf bullets, Nerf shield, Nerf goggles. I didn't know they made so much Nerf stuff, right? And my son, he likes Nerf stuff, but he's not like obsessed with Nerf stuff. So I said, buddy, I mean, thanks for doing the list, but don't you want something other than Nerf things? He said, sure, Dad, but this is the only page that would load. You know, the reality is sometimes it's hard to hope for things that you can't see. And that's not just true of young people. That's true maybe for all of us, that sometimes it's so difficult to hope for the things that we're not able to see. But when we see it, not only does it give us great hope, it actually gives us great joy. Do you understand that very first Christmas? Even with the proclamation of the angels that Jesus had been born in the world, it was not just good news that that child was born. You see, that child came into our world, and that child was on a mission. And that mission would ultimately lead that child to grow up into a man, and that man would be led to a ministry. That ministry ultimately would culminate with his life being given on the cross for you and I. That would not only take care of our sin, providing forgiveness for our sin, but it would connect us to God eternally through him. That ultimately our victory becomes secure. Our eternal relationship with God becomes secure because of the incredible work that God did through Jesus. Now, as I think about really that future reality, the victory we have in him, did you know one of my favorite songs that we sing this time of year is a song called Joy to the World. Love the song Joy to the World. Did you know that the song was not originally written as a Christmas song? It was actually written not speaking of Jesus' first coming, it's actually written speaking of Jesus' second coming. That because of the incredible work that God did through him, what we understand is we understand how the story ends. We know that regardless of the circumstances that I'm facing, we know that there is victory, that there is in Jesus. And because of that, that can give us joy in the moment. It kind of reminds me of another story I heard about a young boy who loved to read books. He was really into these cowboy novels where the cowboy was always the hero of the story. But sometimes when he would read these books, he would get really nervous at those cliffhanger moments in the story because he didn't know what was going to happen to the cowboy hero. Would he be able to overcome the insurmountable obstacle? Would he be able to avoid death in those crazy little moments? And sometimes reading the books, he would get so anxious and so worked up that he'd be full of tears, not knowing what was going to happen to the main character of the story. He'd lose sleep at night over it, so much so that his mom finally told him, you know, if this is going to be your experience, I don't know that it's a good idea to continue to read these books right before you go to bed. Well, a little disappointed, he understood, but the next day he came up with an idea. And he said to his mom, he said, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to read the ending of the book. And if I know what happens, that will probably help me navigate the rest of the story. And so he did just that. And that next night she came in and she watched him reading the book. And as the hero of the story went to those same cliffhanger types of moments, she heard her young son mutter under his breath, if you only knew what I know. If you only knew what I know, it's going to be all right. And I think about that in light of the joy that came to the world in Jesus, not just in his first coming, but with the promise of what that means. The truth is, I don't know what tomorrow is going to hold. I don't know what 2022 is going to hold. I don't know that we'll come out of the pandemic. I don't know if we'll be able to resolve some of the tensions that exist in our country. I don't know if the political volatility will go away. I don't know if we'll be able to unify. I don't know what the future holds. But I do know this. I do know the end of the story. I do know how it ultimately ends. I do know the victory that we have in Jesus. And ultimately, whatever I face in this life, whatever you face in this life, whatever struggles we're up against, I want you to hear your Heavenly Father whisper, if you only knew what I know, you know it's going to be all right. There's victory in him, and because there's victory in him, there can be joy in the present today. It is a message of good news. It's a message that causes great joy. But the last piece, again, is recorded in the same verse. I'm going to put it up again, highlight different words for us. Don't lose steam on me here at the end. Here we go, the last time. Here it goes. It says, the angel said to them, do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people. I love the statement there. It's not just for some. It's not for an elect few. It says that Jesus came for everybody. That means everybody in this room. That means everybody joining us online. That means everybody not in this room and those who didn't join us online. That means for all people. you've ever wondered if God has forgotten you, or if your life is just too messy, be encouraged this Christmas that Jesus came for you. If you're a single parent, just kind of struggling through life, this message is for you. If you're a corporate exec and things are going incredible at work, but your marriage has really fallen on hard times, this message, this good news that causes great joy, this message is for you. If you're someone who just got a difficult diagnosis and you don't know what this next year will hold, this message is for you. If you're somebody who's lost a loved one this year and you're about to experience the first Christmas without them, I want you to know that this message is for you. If you're somebody who's experienced loneliness, depression, anxiety, this message is for you. There is no one that this message is not for. It says it's a message, it's a good news that causes great joy. It's for all people. And I'm convinced of this, that when Jesus entered our world some 2,000 years ago, it fundamentally changed the direction of our world. I'm also convinced if you allow Jesus to enter into your own story this Christmas, it will fundamentally change the trajectory of your life as well. I once heard the story of a little girl. And she grew up in a really tough home. She had an alcoholic for a father, a mother that was very absentee. Life was pretty tough in her home. Some of her earliest memories, she'll share stories when she was 8 years old. She'd be out with her dad. He'd have too much to drink. He was unable to drive home. So their solution was she sat in her dad's lap in the driver's seat, operating the steering wheel, telling him which gas pedal or brake pedal to push to try to navigate their way home. As you would imagine, there was a lot of tension, conflict, even volatility in that home. Her mom also grew up in a very broken environment, and because of that, she just literally was emotionally incapable of expressing love and affection. And because of that, she was physically present, but she was emotionally absent. It was a pretty tough environment for her to grow up in. There was a young man. And this young man, from all intents and purposes, from the outside looking in, he looked like life really was all together. Dad was a leader in the church. Mom, she taught Sunday school. They were kind of the model example of the family that people wanted to be more like. But what was masked by that perception was a hidden battle that his dad had with depression and mental illness that was a constant struggle year after year, even well beyond a decade. Well, that young man eventually graduated high school. He was drafted by the Army to go to Vietnam. While he was in basic training in the Army, he got word that his dad's mental illness and depression had won out, and his dad actually took his own life. Graciously, the Army gave him an honorable discharge. He was able to return home to take care of his mom and his two younger brothers, but as you could imagine, it was a family that was absolutely devastated. But coming back home, this young man met the young girl that I talked about earlier. They eventually started dating. Ultimately, they decided they wanted to get married, but as you can imagine, they both came from very, very broken environments. Addiction, volatility, depression, mental illness. They brought all that with them into this new relationship. You kind of stir the pot. It wasn't the recipe for success in marriage. Yet nevertheless, this young couple decided they were going to draw a line. They would commit their lives fully to Jesus and ask Jesus to be the rescuer of their story. That maybe it's possible for them to draw a line and that their family would not experience the same family dynamics that they both experienced, that maybe God could write a new story through them. And it took a lot of work. And there's a lot of people around them that continue to help them grow and to help them, come together. There was a great work that God did, a healing work He did in each one of their lives to create some wholeness, but slowly but surely, they established their own family that looked nothing like the families that they grew up in. In many ways, you could say breaking some of the chains that had plagued their families for generations, liberating them to experience something different. Fast forward a number of years. They had 2 kids. Both of their 2 kids grew up to be pastors. One of their kids is a pastor in the Las Vegas area who happens to be my older sister, because I'm the other son. I share that with you because I don't know your story. But what I do know is some 2,000 years ago, God broke into this world to write a new story, not only with this world, but with your life. That I believe that God came into this world and it fundamentally changed the trajectory of this world. And if you allow Him into your life this Christmas, it can fundamentally change the direction of your story. And maybe, just maybe, it becomes so transformational that it doesn't just change your story. It changes the story of your kids, your grandkids, maybe for generations to come. By God's grace, my kids know nothing of the brokenness that their grandparents grew up in because God changed the story. Where are you this Christmas? Can we make sure that the little things, as important as they might be, don't keep us from what matters most in life? And maybe, just maybe, God wants to break through into your story this Christmas. If you want to know more what that means and even how to take steps in that direction, I'd encourage you to talk to the person you came with. Or if that doesn't make sense for you, I would encourage you to find me or one of our other pastors after the service. We'd love to talk to you more about that. Or there's a team in the lobby in a room that's called Guest Central. There's a whole team that would love to come alongside you there. Maybe this Christmas is a Christmas that we fully embrace what Jesus came to do, to bring you good news that would cause you great joy. It's a message for all people, including you. Father, we come before you and we say thanks for that very first Christmas. Father, I just ask, just as you broke into this world and fundamentally changed the direction of this world, God, would you break into our lives this Christmas? And by your grace, would you fundamentally change the direction of our journey as well? God, we love you. We say thanks for being a God who brings good news that causes great joy for all people. You're a good God. We say thanks in Jesus' name.